Alright, so we're going to move into a chance to practice the observing exercise that we did today in our small group. And there's a few steps that we'll be going through. The first step is to just consider what's important to you right now as you move into the exercise. If you'd like to pause the tape here and just do a moment of self-connection, maybe even write down what needs you're hoping to meet, that'd be fine. And then assuming you've done that and you're ready to move on, the next step is to write down some judgments, maybe 2 or 3 judgments that you've noticed. It could be a judgment of me that you're having even right now as you watch this video. It could be a judgment of somebody else that's important to you. It could be a judgment of someone that you don't even know who they are. But just take a moment and write down 2 or 3 judgments. Then assuming that you've done that step, moving on to the next one, which is to have some practice translating and transforming the judgment into an observation. And here's how you do that. First is just to pick one of the judgments that you have for the purposes of the exercise, knowing that you can get back to the other ones and practice with them later. And then to notice what was happening in you just before you made the judgment. So for example, my judgment was she was being rude. And just before that judgment occurred to me, what was happening was I was speaking and she started talking before I was finished saying what I wanted to say. So that's how you get to the observation, is to notice what was happening, what was actually happening in the world just before you had the judgment. So you can pause the tape here and write down what was happening for you just before your judgment. So now take a moment and consider the different body experience that you have between saying the evaluation or the judgment and then saying to yourself the observation. Noticing if there's any difference for you, and maybe making a note of that. Then the next step, close to the end here, is to consider what is the judgment and the observation telling you about what's important to you in this moment when the judgment occurred. So what's important to you? So in my case, my judgment is she's rude. My observation is I was speaking and someone else started talking before I finished. And the observation really helps me get connected to what's important to me is finishing. I'd really like to communicate, to finish, have a sense of completion in the expression that I would like to make. Another need that's up for me is something around connection. I'd like to have a sense of connection with whoever it is that I'm expressing to. So those are the 2 needs that I identify that are important to me. So what's important to you? Take a moment and consider that and write it down. And as a final step in this exercise, what have you learned from doing this? Just harvest for yourself anything that you're taking away from the exercise. Maybe make a note in your journal or on your notes. I'd love it if you would consider writing to the forum and saying a little bit about what your experience is. Then I'm also noticing in me a need for feedback. I'd like to know how it was for you to receive this exercise in video form. It's the first time I've done that, so I'm really curious about whether you enjoyed it or not, whether it contributed to a sense of connection or learning or any other needs. And I'd like to celebrate that with you, and I'd also like to mourn if there's something about this that didn't work for you. So that's it for now. Look forward to connecting with you in our next class. Aloha.